Imagine waking up to find an entire community has vanished overnight. Men, women, children, all gone without a trace. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just empty homes and the whisper of wind through abandoned streets. In 1889, this nightmare became reality in the Arizona Territory, and it would take an unlikely partnership between a determined sheriff and a skilled Apache tracker to uncover the truth. This is the story of two men from different worlds who discovered that justice has no color and that some mysteries run deeper than the desert itself. If you're ready for a tale of mystery, partnership, and the relentless pursuit of truth in the Old West, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This story will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very last word. Sheriff Jake McAllister had seen his share of strange things in 15 years of keeping the peace in the Arizona Territory. But nothing had prepared him for what greeted him on that scorching September morning in 1889. The town of Copper Falls, which had bustled with nearly 200 souls just 3 days prior, stood completely empty. McAllister was a man built for frontier law enforcement. At 38, he stood 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and steel-gray eyes that still held the determination that had made him one of the most respected lawmen in the territory. His weathered face bore the lines of a man who'd seen too much violence, but his resolve remained unshaken. He'd ridden to Copper Falls in response to a telegram requesting assistance with civil unrest. The mining town had been experiencing tensions between Anglo settlers and Mexican families seeking work. It was the kind of situation McAllister had dealt with dozens of times before, but as McAllister rode down Main Street, his horse's hooves echoing eerily in the silence, he realized this was something far beyond civil unrest. Doors stood open, revealing interrupted meals still sitting on tables. Laundry hung motionless on lines, and a child's toy wagon sat abandoned in the street. McAllister spent 2 hours conducting a methodical search. Every building told the same story, lives interrupted mid-action, but no signs of violence. In the schoolhouse, children's slates bore half-finished arithmetic problems. At the saloon, cards lay scattered as if a poker game had been abandoned mid-hand. The bank's safe stood open, but untouched. At the church, McAllister found the first clue this wasn't some mass exodus. Father Miguel's Bible lay open on the pulpit, and scattered around the altar were personal belongings: a woman's locket, a man's pocket watch, a child's wooden horse. These weren't items people would abandon willingly. As afternoon approached, McAllister noticed tracks in the dust around the church. He was a competent tracker, but what he saw confused him. Boot prints, certainly, and wagon wheel marks. But other impressions, too. Patterns he couldn't identify that looked almost like bare feet, but with wrong spacing and depth. As the sun began its descent, McAllister realized he needed help. This was beyond his expertise. He needed someone who could read the desert like he read wanted posters, an Apache tracker. The relationship between law enforcement and Apache tribes was complicated. Years of warfare and broken treaties had created a chasm few were willing to cross. But McAllister had heard stories about Red Deer, a tracker who had worked with the army and was said to follow trails others couldn't see. That night, McAllister made camp outside town, unwilling to sleep in the abandoned buildings. As he sat by his fire near midnight, he heard soft footsteps approaching, so quiet most men would have missed them. "I know you're out there," he called into the darkness. "Show yourself." A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, lean, moving with fluid grace. The man was Apache, wearing a mixture of traditional clothing and practical frontier gear. "You are the sheriff," the man said, his English accented but clear. "The one they call McAllister." "I am." "And you are?" "I am called Red Deer. I have been watching you search the empty town. You are looking for answers." McAllister studied the Apache. Red Deer appeared to be in his early 30s, with the lean build of someone who lived off the land. His long black hair was tied back, and his dark eyes held commanding intelligence. "You know what happened here?" McAllister asked. Red Deer shook his head. I know only that something unnatural has occurred. My people felt it, a disturbance in the balance. The animals fled this place 2 days ago. Even the buzzards will not come here. Will you help me find out what happened to these people? Red Deer stared into the fire before answering. My people and yours have not been friends, Sheriff McAllister. There is much blood between us, I know. But right now, nearly 200 people are missing, and I think whatever took them doesn't care about skin color. I need your help. You would trust an Apache to help you find white settlers. I'd trust a good tracker to help me find missing people. From what I've heard, you're the best in the territory. Red Deer took the child's wooden horse McAllister offered him, turning it over gently. A child's treasure. No parent would abandon this by choice. After several minutes of consideration, Red Deer looked up. I will help you, Sheriff. But I have conditions. Name them. We work as equals. You do not give me orders. We share information and make decisions together. McAllister nodded. Agreed. And when we find the truth, you will ensure my people are not blamed. If your people aren't responsible, they won't be blamed. You have my word. Red Deer studied the sheriff's face, searching for deception. Then we have an agreement, Sheriff McAllister. Tomorrow we begin tracking the whispers in the dust. Dawn painted the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold. McAllister had slept fitfully, his dreams filled with empty houses. He was brewing coffee when Red Deer appeared from the morning shadows. You sleep like a man with troubles, Red Deer observed, settling beside the fire. Hard to sleep soundly when you don't understand what you're dealing with, McAllister replied, offering coffee. I've been thinking about the animals fleeing. They don't run from people, they run from predators, or from something that disturbs the natural order, Red Deer said. My grandmother told stories of times when the earth would warn of danger, when birds would fall silent and coyotes would howl at midday. You think this is something like that? I think we should examine the tracks before deciding. They entered Copper Falls as the sun climbed higher. Red Deer moved through the streets with purpose, reading signs invisible to McAllister. Here, Red Deer said, kneeling beside ordinary-looking dirt. Many people gathered. They were not running. Their steps are measured, deliberate. How can you tell? The depth of prints, the spacing. When people run in fear, their strides are longer, erratic. These people walked calmly, as if going to a planned gathering. At the church, Red Deer spent an hour studying the area around the scattered belongings. This is strange, he murmured. The people came willingly, but then he moved to examine ground near the steps. There are other tracks here. Not human, but not animal either. What kind of something else? I have never seen tracks like these. They are wrong somehow, too deep for the size, too precise for something wild. The trail led east into harsh desert toward distant mountains. Red Deer followed with patient precision, while McAllister struggled to see any passage signs. They turned north here, toward the old mining claims, Red Deer said, pointing to seemingly ordinary ground. The abandoned claims, those have been empty for years. Not empty, avoided. My people do not go there. There are stories. What kind of stories? The miners found something in deep tunnels that should have been left buried. When they brought it to the surface, bad things happened. Men disappeared. Others went mad. The company abandoned the claims and forbade anyone to return. When was this? 5, maybe 6 years ago. They sealed the tunnels and posted guards, but the guards disappeared too. They followed the trail for hours, Red Deer reading landscape signs that seemed impossible to McAllister. The tracker would stop to examine disturbed rocks, bent vegetation, marks in sand that looked random but told stories to trained eyes. They were herded like cattle, Red Deer said during one stop. But willingly. No signs of resistance. How do you herd people willingly? Perhaps they were promised something, or feared something worse. When they crested a low ridge, they saw their destination below. The abandoned mining claims looked like a wound in the landscape. Scarred earth, collapsed buildings, dark mouths of sealed shafts. But the camp wasn't abandoned anymore. Smoke rose from several buildings. Figures moved between structures, and most disturbing, a large group of people sat in what appeared to be a makeshift corral, people who looked like the missing residents of Copper Falls. Well, McAllister said grimly. "I guess we found them." "Finding them was the easy part," Red Deer replied. "Now we figure out how to get them out alive." McAllister studied the scene through his spyglass. The people in the corral weren't just sitting. They were listless, staring at nothing with blank expressions. Guards patrolled with military precision, but their movements were wrong somehow. "Take a look and tell me what you see," McAllister said, passing the spyglass. Red Deer studied the camp for several minutes. The people are alive, but not themselves. And the guards, they move wrong. Like men, but not men. "Sheriff, look at their shadows." McAllister focused on the guards and felt his mouth go dry. They cast shadows, but the shadows were wrong. Too long, too dark, moving independently of the figures casting them. What in God's name are we dealing with? "I do not think God has anything to do with this," Red Deer replied. "This is something older, something buried for good reason." They watched as guards approached the corral and selected people one by one. The chosen individuals responded by standing and walking with the same listless, mechanical movement, following the guards toward the main building. None returned. "We need a plan," McAllister said. "We need to understand what we are fighting," Red Deer countered. "Bullets may not stop something that casts shadows like that. Then we better figure it out fast." "I'm not leaving those people to whatever fate awaits them," Red Deer nodded grimly. "Nor am I, Sheriff." "Nor am I." As afternoon wore on, McAllister and Red Deer observed the methodical horror below. Every hour, guards selected another person from the corral. The chosen individual would rise without protest and follow the guard toward the main building. None ever returned. "They're not fighting it," McAllister observed. "Why aren't they fighting?" "My grandmother told stories of spirits that could steal a person's will," Red Deer said. "But those were just stories." Maybe they weren't. The guards never tired, never took breaks, never showed normal human behaviors. They moved with mechanical precision, but there was something fundamentally wrong about their movements. "Look at their eyes," Red Deer said. Passing the spyglass, McAllister focused on one guard and immediately understood. The guard's eyes were completely black, not just pupils, but the entire visible eye. Like looking into empty sockets filled with shadow. What are they? Not human. At least not anymore. As evening approached, reinforcements arrived, a dozen men on horseback leading supply wagons. But these weren't ordinary travelers either. They moved with the same mechanical precision, and their shadows writhed in ways that defied nature. "We cannot wait much longer," Red Deer said. "By my count, they have taken nearly 30 people today. We need to get closer. Learn what's happening in that main building." After dark, Red Deer led them down into the valley through a route that avoided patrol patterns. Moving through desert at night required skills McAllister possessed, but Red Deer had perfected. They reached a position behind the main building where they could observe through a large window. What they saw belonged in nightmares rather than the Arizona desert. The interior had been transformed into something horrific. Walls were covered with symbols that seemed to writhe in torchlight, and the floor was marked with intricate patterns drawn in what looked like dried blood. At the center stood a figure clearly leading this operation, tall, wearing businessman's clothes, but with the same black eyes as the guards. Around him, shadow creatures stood in a perfect circle, and in the center knelt Sarah Chen from Copper Falls General Store. The leader spoke in an unrecognizable language, his voice carrying authority that resonated through the air. As he spoke, wall symbols began glowing with sickly green light, and Sarah's eyes slowly changed from brown to the same empty black as her captors. "They're changing them," McAllister whispered in horror, "turning them into more of those things. We must act now before they complete the ritual." But approaching footsteps announced a guard making rounds. Red Deer noticed the guard's shadow stretching toward their hiding place, as if sensing their presence. "Run," Red Deer whispered urgently. "Now!" They broke cover as the guard rounded the corner, its black eyes fixing on them with inhuman intensity. The creature released an unnatural sound, part scream, part howl. Immediately, answering calls came from throughout the camp. "So much for stealth," McAllister muttered, drawing his Colt. The first guard reached them as they cleared building ruins. McAllister put 3 bullets center mass, but they passed through like the creature was made of smoke. Red Deer's obsidian-tipped arrow, however, struck the creature, which screamed and dissolved into shadow. "The old ways work better," Red Deer called, knocking another arrow. "Your modern bullets pass through them, but stone and steel forged in the old manner can hurt them." McAllister switched to his father's knife, forged by an old country blacksmith. When the next creature reached him, he drove the blade into its chest, and it dissolved like Red Deer's target. But there were too many, and more emerged from the main building. They could hear horses. The reinforcements were mounting pursuit. "We need to get to the mine shafts," Red Deer said, surprising McAllister. "If this evil came from below, that is where we will find its source." They ran toward the sealed mine entrances, Red Deer's arrows and McAllister's knife clearing a path. The largest shaft had been sealed with heavy timbers. McAllister put his shoulder to it while Red Deer provided cover, and the barrier gave way. They plunged into the mine shaft's darkness just as pursuers reached the entrance. The tunnel was pitch black, filled with the smell of old earth and decay. Behind them, shadow creatures gathered at the entrance but didn't follow. "Why aren't they coming after us?" McAllister asked, lighting a match. Red Deer examined the tunnel walls, his face grim in flickering light. "Because they do not need to. Look, the walls were covered with the same symbols from the main building. But these were older, carved deep into rock itself." "The miners didn't find something down here," Red Deer said quietly. "They found someone who had been waiting a very long time to be discovered." A voice echoed from the depths, ancient, powerful, filled with malevolent amusement. "Welcome, Sheriff McAllister. Welcome, Red Deer of the Apache. I have been expecting you." The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, reverberating off stone walls with authority that made both men's skin crawl. As McAllister lit another match, the carved symbols began glowing with the same sickly green radiance they'd witnessed above. "You know who we are," McAllister called into the darkness. "I know many things." "Sheriff," the voice replied from deeper in the tunnel, "I know you seek the people of Copper Falls. I know you believe you can save them. I know you are wrong." Red Deer knocked an obsidian-tipped arrow. "Who are you? What do you want with those people?" Ancient laughter echoed through the shaft. "I'm older than your tribes, Apache. Older than your laws, Sheriff. I was here when this land was young. As for what I want what was taken from me." They moved deeper into the tunnel, following the main shaft as it descended steeply. The symbols grew more numerous and complex, and the air grew thick with oppressive presence that made breathing difficult. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, expanded far beyond any mining operations needs. At the center stood a figure that might once have been human, but was now something far more terrible. And tall and gaunt, dressed in remnants of fine clothing, it radiated power and malevolence. "Welcome to my domain," the creature said. "I am Nathaniel Blackwood. I was the owner of these mines, the man who discovered the truth beneath this desert." McAllister kept his knife ready. "What truth?" "That this land is built on foundations older than your civilization dreams. That there are powers in the earth your people have forgotten. I found the old places, the old ways, and I learned that death is not an ending, it is a transformation." Red Deer stepped forward, bow drawn. "You have taken the people of Copper Falls. You have corrupted them." "Corrupted?" Blackwood laughed. "I have given them purpose. I have made them part of something greater than their meaningless lives. They serve me now as they should have in life." "You're feeding on them," McAllister said, understanding flooding through him. "You need their life force to maintain whatever unholy existence you've created." Blackwood's expression became more predatory. "Very good, Sheriff. Yes, I require sustenance to maintain my form. The mining accident that killed my body was merely an inconvenience. I learned to draw power from the living, but it was never enough to restore me to full power." "Until you found a way to take an entire town," Red Deer said grimly. "Until I found a way to take an entire territory." Copper Falls was merely the beginning. Soon, every settlement in Arizona will serve my needs. McAllister studied the chamber, noting how carved patterns seemed to focus on where Blackwood stood. Red Deer, those symbols, they're not decoration. They're some kind of containment system. Understanding dawned in the tracker's expression. The miners didn't just find him. They found him trapped. Blackwood's confident expression flickered, confirming their suspicions. The mining accident wasn't an accident, McAllister continued. The miners found this chamber, found you trapped in whatever prison the original inhabitants built. When they broke the containment, they freed me, Blackwood finished angrily. But not completely. The old binding still holds some power. That is why I need so many lives to break the remaining bonds. Red Deer studied the floor patterns. My grandmother's stories spoke of such places, sacred sites where great evils were bound by ancestral wisdom. She said such bindings could only be maintained by those who understood the old ways. Your grandmother was wise, but her people are gone. The old ways are forgotten, but Red Deer was smiling. You are wrong, creature. The old ways are not forgotten. They live in the blood, in the memory, in the connection between people and land. The Apache began chanting in his native language, his voice rising and falling in patterns that resonated with the stone around them. The symbols began pulsing with different light, not sickly green, but warm, golden radiance that pushed back the darkness. No, Blackwood snarled, lunging forward. I will not be bound again. McAllister was ready. As the creature attacked, the sheriff drove his father's knife deep into Blackwood's chest. The old-world blade bit deep into the creature's form. Blackwood screamed, grabbing McAllister by the throat and lifting him with inhuman strength. You think your primitive blade can harm me? But Red Deer's chanting had grown stronger, and golden light was spreading from walls to floor, following carved patterns toward the chamber's center. Where light touched, Blackwood's form wavered. The bindings are responding, Red Deer called out, his voice strained. But I cannot complete the ritual alone. I need the willing sacrifice of one who serves justice. McAllister understood. The knife wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to anchor Blackwood while the bindings were renewed. But completing the ritual would require someone to remain behind. Tell my story, he said to Red Deer. Make sure people know what happened here. McAllister grabbed the knife's handle and twisted it deeper, using his own life force to complete the connection. Blackwood's scream echoed through the chamber as golden light engulfed them both. Instead of expected death, McAllister felt a surge of clean, strong power. The light flowed through him, using his willingness to sacrifice as a conduit for ancient magic. Red Deer's chanting reached crescendo, and symbols blazed with brilliant radiance. Blackwood's form began dissolving, his substance drawn back into the floor patterns, back into his centuries-old prison. This is not over, the creature howled as he dispersed. I will return! His voice cut off as the last essence was absorbed into the binding patterns. Golden light faded, leaving the chamber in darkness except for McAllister's remaining matches. Sheriff, are you alive? McAllister found himself on his knees beside the empty space where Blackwood had stood. He was alive, though drained and shaky. I'm here. Is it over? It is over. The binding is complete. The creature is trapped, and this time the prison will hold. As they returned to the surface, they heard sounds of confusion from the camp above. The shadow creatures had collapsed when their master was bound, and the people of Copper Falls were waking from their unnatural stupor. When they emerged, they found chaos. The residents were scattered throughout the camp, confused and frightened, but alive and human once more. The shadow creatures had dissolved, leaving only empty clothes. It took hours to organize survivors and begin the journey back to Copper Falls. Many had no memory of what happened, remembering only a compulsion to walk into the desert. Others remembered fragments, enough to know something terrible had been averted. As the sun rose over the Arizona desert, McAllister and Red Deer sat on the ridge overlooking the abandoned camp. The people were safe, the threat ended, and the ancient evil bound once more. What happens now? McAllister asked. "Now we ensure this place is properly sealed. My people will know how to ward it. And you will have a story few will believe." McAllister nodded, understanding the official report would need careful writing. A gas leak, perhaps, or contaminated water causing hallucinations. Red Deer, working with you has been an honor. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me." The Apache smiled warmly for the first time since they'd met. "And you have shown me that not all white lawmen are the same. Perhaps there is hope for understanding between our peoples." As they prepared to part ways, both men knew they had forged something rare and valuable. They had proven that justice and courage knew no boundaries of race or culture, and that sometimes the most unlikely partnerships could accomplish the impossible. 5 years later, Sheriff Jake McAllister stood in his Tucson office, reading a letter. "Sheriff McAllister, the bindings remain strong. The people are safe. Your friend always, Red Deer." McAllister smiled and filed the letter with others received over the years. Red Deer had kept his word, ensuring the mining site remained warded. In return, McAllister had used his influence to protect Red Deer's people and had quietly spread word among lawmen that the Apache could be trusted. The official report had blamed a gas leak, and most people seemed content with that explanation. But among certain circles, lawmen dealing with frontier strangeness, Apache elders remembering old stories, and survivors retaining memory fragments, the true story was known and respected. McAllister had been promoted twice since then, his reputation growing throughout the territory. But he never forgot the lesson learned in that underground chamber. The true strength came not from dominating others, but from willingness to sacrifice for them, and sometimes, late at night when desert wind whispered through Tucson streets, he would remember the partnership that had saved hundreds of lives and proven that understanding could triumph over hatred, that courage could overcome fear, and that justice truly knew no boundaries. The whispers in the dust had been silenced. But the story they told would echo through ages, a testament to the power of unlikely alliances and the enduring strength of those who choose to stand against darkness. If this tale of justice, partnership, and the triumph of good over ancient evil captivated you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories from the untamed frontier. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an adventure, and let us know in the comments, do you believe that understanding between different peoples can overcome even the darkest challenges? Share your thoughts below, and remember, sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who learn to see past their differences to fight for what's right. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of the American West, where courage and justice proved stronger than ancient evil, and where two men from different worlds discovered that honor has no color.